It's me again, and I'm here to talk to you today about the tragedy of Orson Welles. Now, everybody's familiar with, when you think of Orson Welles, you think of his great War of the Worlds thing, and of course, you think of the great Citizen Kane, which everybody knows and is considered one of the best films, well, actually the best film ever made. If it's not Citizen Kane, then it's usually The Godfather. But anyways, what I'm here to talk to you about is not those things, because those were successes on his part. War of the Worlds had that panic thing, but other than that, it was all considered a success for Welles. But after Citizen Kane, what he followed that up with was a film called The Magnificent Ambersons, which was based on a book. And after Welles had done the film, he had his cut. He went to Brazil to make another movie, which didn't get made. But while he was gone, they cut, RKO was the studio that did the film, they cut 50 minutes of it and had it re-edited by a director named Robert Wise. So Robert Wise would go on to direct film. This time he was, an editor. But other than that, and they basically cut Welles off from the creative process and the editing of it. Now, supposedly, print of Welles' original cut got sent to him in Brazil, but that's never been found. So you're stuck with an hour and 28-minute version of what could have been a film even greater than Citizen Kane, which is, some people consider this to be, exciting in its own right, and it is. It's a very great film, but it's one of those cinematic what ifs. What if RKO had just left it alone, like they did Citizen Kane? But it isn't like Citizen Kane didn't just get, made and released just because of just Welles' brilliant. Now, he fought tooth and nail to get Citizen Kane the way he wanted to. I guess they let him have that one, and I guess they weren't going to give him another one, and they didn't, because outside of RKO, Welles had several other. He had a series of misfortunes with a lot of his films. They'd get cut and released in just this real kind of, I don't know what you'd call it. I don't know the words to describe it. It just kind of be like a fucking crime almost. Because, like with the case of Touch of Evil, they cut that down severely, and he wrote memos. He wrote like a 50-something page memo to Universal to not cut his film, to put it the way he wanted to, because he put his heart and soul into these films. They cut it out, just to make money. In all actuality, they survived the test of time, but it's not the way it was supposed to be, And the thing about Magnificent Ambersons is that no matter what they could cut out of that film, it didn't even make a difference. You can't take away that Orson Welles signature. It's still there. No matter what they cut, it's still an Orson Welles film through and through, because you can't, unless they completely reshot the film, they're not going to take away the brilliance that is Orson Welles. So that's what still makes this movie hold true today, and it's a sad thing. You don't hear about it as much now as you did back then with guys like Orson Welles, and even guys like Peckinpah and several other people that got their films severely cut by the studios. Even Sergio Leone with Once Upon a Time in America, what they did to that movie was a fucking crime too. But the difference between all the rest of those films, they've been restored. They've been restored to their original thing, the original cut that was intended. Like you get the Wild Bunch director's cut the way Sam Peckinpah wanted you to see it. You get Once Upon a Time in America essentially the way Sergio Leone wanted you to see it, not edited by the damn guys at Cut Police Academy. You get Touch of Evil the way Welles intended it to be, the way his 50-something page memo told the suits at Universal how that film should be. But the biggest crime done to the Magnificent Ambersons is RKO destroyed the footage. Now, supposedly, it's because they needed vault space, which is probably a load of shit. But more than likely, they did it because they didn't want Wells doing his thing, and that in itself is a crime, because you don't want to silence cinematic genius. You know, when you cut that off, it's like clubbing a baby seal. It's uncalled for. You know, well, maybe not that severe, but you catch my drift. But the reason why you don't hear about this today, films being cut severely by the studio against the director's intention, is because the directors that work in the studio now are tailor-made to make the kind of movies that the studios want them to make. And as far as the independents that work in the studios, like, you know, say Tarantino, the Coens, or Paul Thomas Anderson or Wes Anderson, those kind of guys get away with more because their films are not as expensive as the big studio films. So the studios, they don't cost them that much money, so they can pretty much, they release them, they'll make their money back. They don't have to mess with those films. But back where you had guys like Orson Welles and Sam Peckinpah and, you know, other people, Eric von Stroheim, another one of those, the biggest tragedy of greed, that the big epic von Stroheim did severely cut down. Who knows if we'll ever see that one again. But the one thing, those guys were the independents. They weren't tailor-made to fit a studio. And that's why they were cinematic geniuses. They weren't worrying about, you know, how much money they're going to make at the box office, or how much money they're going to make off this film, or where they can fucking put it. They were more concerned about art, the cinematic art, and getting the necessary thing for their film. And that's lost. It's more of a studios, or more like a factory. They're not as concerned. Now, you had it in the 70s, where the big studios were working more for quality instead of quantity. But that kind of, you know, we all know the story. You know, if you don't, read the book Easy Riders, Raging Bulls by Peter Biskin. It's a wonderful book, and you really understand that era in film. But Orson Welles, he never really... Citizen Kane is probably his biggest success. Touch of Evil, essentially, that one still maintained a good following, but the Magnificent Ambersons just kind of fell to the wayside. I mean, just recently, Warner Brothers released a bare bones DVD of the Magnificent Ambersons, you know, to kind of coincide with the 70th anniversary of the Citizen Kane. But we may never know, unless they do find that elusive print that was supposedly sent to Wells in Brazil. But other than that, your guess is as good as mine on what this film could have been. And that, my friends, is the tragedy of Orson Welles. Pretty much death by the studio. And that is a damn shame to a great mind like Orson Welles. And that's it. If you want to read more about what I do, filmnowandforever.blogspot.com is the place to go. And thank you.